So you guys have been absolutely wonderful. If afterwards you think of anything you either would have liked to have seen or want to tell me some good pointers on things we should always keep doing, we'd like to make it an annual event. So I love feedback from you guys because we want to keep doing things like this. I think this is a great way to.
I have a question, Doc. While this is coming up, and we're slow on this technology sometimes. Do you see improvements coming up to my programming lab?
Oh, yeah. As a matter of fact, all of the labs are undergoing these studies, and Krista can speak a little bit to that, to make sure that they are following these efficacy studies. You know, are we doing what we should be doing? And my programming lab is a little different than some of our other labs because it doesn't have like a study plan, and it's supposed to get students to do practical programming and get feedback. So it's actually a very unusual, specific lab. But you will see more like synchronicity between our labs are going to start looking more similar because things that are being effective in one are going to be replicated. So this fall, we have in accounting and business, we have these things called dynamic study modules, and in the fall we will have them for all of our disciplines. So you'll see some of that being replicated because we found they're effective and they're working. You know, so we're also doing a lot more adaptive. You know, students learn individually, and our labs are going to be much more individual. They're going to take what the student does specifically and follow them. We're also going to have a lot more successive courses following each other. So you'll be able to hear that if you take, kind of to what Kate was saying, if you take accounting 1 and you have trouble with debits and credits, when you take the next accounting course, it remembers you had trouble with debits and credits, and it gives you practice because you specifically have a failing point there. And it's going to know that as you follow in successive classes, accounting, econ, you know, there's certain ones that follow each other. So we're doing some really interesting brain science stuff, and I'll let Tegan talk to that a little bit. But Andre is, as I said, doing a IT case study. If you can't get this up, hopefully we can still talk about his...
we can do it as we say.
Technology glitches. I'll let him tell us maybe a little bit about his background. He's got a few jokes. You don't have to listen to him anyway.
Well, thank you. We'll try to kill some time here as we're going. So, okay, here's where Dr. Ryan is. This is where I'm from. Right there. We don't have as much snow down there or up there as we normally do, but it's been incredibly cold up in Niagara Falls. You may have seen the video of the frozen falls on YouTube that went viral a while back. It doesn't happen too often, but while the water was still flowing in underneath, there was thick ice in front of the falls, so you couldn't see the water falling anymore. Excuse me. Before I start anything too complex here, I do want to apologize for Justin Bieber. I had nothing to do with it, but we did give you Rob Ford, so I think it's probably going to balance out some. And it just doesn't want to come on for me. So maybe I'll speak for my slides. Is it coming? Oh, that's not my slide.
That's a projector. It's for a countdown.
Yes, oh.
It's building the suspense.
Warming up.
Yeah, that's what it is. That's what it is.
6 seconds.
What does that say?
It says I don't want to work.
And you know, really, Justin Bieber has nothing on Rob Ford.
Oh.
That guy continues to amaze and impress.
He's a survivor, isn't he?
That's a nice slide.
I worked hours designing this one. This is just absolutely beyond me why it's not working.
Maybe drivers. Because drivers prefers the PC might not match with this. Oh, there it goes.
Okay, well here's what we're going to do. I'm not always prepared.
Okay, that looks good.
So, I don't have a remote for this. Maréchal Walmasel Joseph Webb. Yes, I'm Canadian, I'm French. Andy is good. I'm from Niagara College, Canada, which is a mid-sized college nestled in the vineyards of Niagara-on-the-Lake. We do have a winemaking program, and we do have a brewmaster program, and they are unique in the country, although we sold our brewmaster program to 2 universities in Western Canada. We have 3 campuses. The one I work at is Niagara-on-the-Lake. We have 20 acres of grapes growing on the property, which we make our own wine from. In Welland, where we start. Oh, yes.
I'm sorry, do you need more faculty?
Yeah.
Did you bring samples?
Hey, they took my hairspray. I couldn't get any wine. I know Mike likes some ice wine. I was going to bring him a bottle of our newest.
Just next door.
There you go. However, the Welland campus is our main campus. It started back in 1967. In the last 3 years, we've added $90 million of expansion in the Welland campus, and we've just recently started a $50 million expansion over in Niagara-on-the-Lake where I work. We're into what we call a differentiation process. The government of Ontario has come down just before an election, go figure, and said, we're going to try to see what the individual colleges in the province do differently than the other ones, so that we can maybe highlight those programs, and then we'll identify the ones that the individual colleges don't do so well and do what we need to, and everything else is going to fall into the middle. So it's going to be like 10%, this is different, 10%, this isn't so great, and 80% we're doing just fine, no changes needed. Obviously, with the money that we're spending and the programs that we have that are already unique, those are the ones that we're going to be concentrating our expansions on and the differentiation process. In our hospitality or I think we'll call the Canadian food, wine, beverage, something or other of Canada and whatever. So we're doing a whole bunch of that, and that's where we're going to be spending most of the $50 million on Niagara-on-the-Lake. However, we do deliver a computer applications course, which is mandated by our government. Our government dictates that anybody graduating college should have a fundamental knowledge of certain basic computer skills. And we have been running a program for quite a while. We run it to about 27 to 3,000 students. We run it to about 70% of the population. The business area takes care of their own stuff and what have you. And with all the expansion that we've been doing, over the last 7 years, we've grown from about 5,000 students to well over 10,000 students. So we are growing by leaps and bounds. The way we used to present this course, it used to be 2 different courses, 2 2-hour deliveries. The first one in the first year was a combination of PowerPoint and Word. And in the second year or second semester, depending on the program you were in, we had an Excel course and got into it at basically an introductory level. We were running out of computer room because apparently $90 million doesn't buy you an extra computer lab. But
They got grapes on campus.
We decided that one of our goals was going to be to find a way of doing this without necessarily having to increase the amount of computer spaces that we were using. The old way of doing it, we offered a test out option in the first semester only. In the 3rd week of the semester, after everybody was settled in and whatever, you could come in during a regularly scheduled class and write a test. And it used to be that if you got 50%, you passed the course, you can accept that mark, disappear, and that's what's going to be in your transcript for your computer application course. And it's amazing how many people who got 51% were gone the very next minute they found out what their score was, and away they went, very happy with their 51%. Of course, what that meant is after the 3rd week, we had a whole bunch of classes that didn't have as many students in it as we had started with. We became very good at scheduling and block scheduling 4 different sections at the same time, so we can collapse 4 sections into 2 or 3 sections into 1 or whatever. We would have to hire part-time teachers for 3 weeks with the understanding that you may not be here after the test out, or you may have 4 sections right now, you may only have 2 sections after the test out. Scheduling labs we were tying up every computer lab for the first month, and after that, half of them would become open, which was a little late for the rest of the courses, who had already started. So we needed to do something to help that thing out. Any student who took the 50% was given the option of taking another course, because the computer application course was part of their tuition for the program that they were in. Except that we don't allow new students in after the third week. So it was an interesting dilemma that caused a whole bunch of fun problems and challenges that were becoming incredibly stressful for people. So what we decided to do back in '07, I believe it was, is combine the two courses, immediately freeing up 2 hours for every program area, which they were quite thankful for. That also guaranteed that in one course, the student was getting the skills that we used to deliver in 2 courses, so that they were able to use spreadsheets after their first semester and didn't have to wait until either the end of the second semester or even the start of the third. PowerPoint, Word, and Excel, free up teaching time. The scheduling time was a whole bunch easier. The schedulers are actually talking to me again. One has since retired. What we now do, or what we can do, and how we save space, is that we doubled up the amount of students per section. Everybody must take the course. You can't test out. You must take the course, but we now have sections of 60 and 80 students in a classroom that may only have 30 or 40 computers. What we do is, all of the training exercises or the practice exercises are the student's responsibility. Go off, play with it, have fun. If you run into any problems, you're still scheduled 2 hours a week. There's a teacher in a lab waiting to help you out. So if at any point you have an issue or your internet is down or whatever, you're there, you're golden. But you must be in class to write the 3 tests. And because of the size of the class, week 1 we'd have the first half of the class, week 2 we'd have the second half of the class. So we double the amount of students we can push through the same lab, thereby cutting the amount of lab space we needed, and for all you deans and management type, having the amount of teachers that we actually had to pay to deliver the program, which made me a hero with my management team. My union still doesn't think it was a good move. Now, we at first said, well, isn't this a cool idea, the power of my IT lab with all of its ingenious little show me and teach me and what part of the book should I reread and all of that fun stuff. We're going to let the students decide what test and when they want to write it. We've got a 15-week semester. Pick a time, come on in. When you think you're ready, write. If you're really good at Excel, you want to do the Excel test first, come on in, write the test. What day do you want to do it? Next Thursday, talk to your teacher, we'll set that up, no problem. Unfortunately, we also gave each student 2 chances at each test. Now, I don't know what it's like down here, other than much warmer and a lot more fun to be at. When you tell a student you've got 2 chances at something, they think the first chance is studying, and the second chance is the one they take immediately after they fail the first chance without any additional studying. And unfortunately, the scores very clearly indicated that. The other fun thing about allowing a student to manage their time coming out of high school, where the concept of time management was very foreign, is that 2,700 students seemed to think it was okay for all of them to write 3 tests on the very last class of the semester, which was impossible because each test was about an hour and a half long and your class is only 2 hours long. So by the time we got to the end of the semester, about 2 months into the semester, we realized we were running into a huge, huge problem. We were sitting, my dean and I, who thank goodness was with me all the way, we were sitting there at one point and he looked at me, he goes, "Do you realize that you and I will be single-handedly responsible for the failure of a complete cohort?" So, yeah, it wasn't a whole bunch of fun. Those who, I mean, you're 10% of the students, the keeners, they come in, they're done. 3 weeks later, they've got 100 and they've moved on. Those who were trying to work on the stuff the way they should have, were still struggling with it, and the marks were lower than what we were doing the old way, which became a really big concern. So that semester was a nightmare, and we quickly turned the page. And then we said, okay, well, they still need to write 3 tests. obviously. That's what the whole course is about. That's how we're going to be able to tell if they've learned the skills and hit the outcomes that we've established for them. But what we did is we gave each student a date to when they needed to write the test. And we broke the tests down, and we weighted the tests differently. We made the PowerPoint test the first one, because I think you'll agree it's the easiest of the three to pick up. And if you're going to blow your first test, I know you've never experienced that here about students, but they're only throwing away 10%. We still get students who said, oh, I didn't know I was supposed to come in and write that test, because that paper you signed the first day of class with your schedule, and it didn't mean anything to you. But so we will have a good chunk of students, for whatever reason, just blow the first test. It's just PowerPoint, and it's just 10%. It's their wake-up call. They still have 90% on the course. They can still succeed this course and get a great, great mark. We offer the PowerPoint test 4 weeks into the semester, which allowed us a week of orientation with every student, show them how my IT lab works, how to actually register into it with our access code, and we would email everything out to them, and they still didn't know what to do with it, but anyway. And then they have 3 weeks to go out on their own and work on the assignments. We encourage them to do the practice exercises. We encourage them to do them more than once. If you do the first PowerPoint exercise and it takes you 4.5 hours, even though you got a good mark, you may want to do it again until it becomes a little easier for you. And I have some stats to show you what difference that makes. And then the Word test would be 40% and Excel 50, and they were spaced out 4 weeks after each other, so you would be done by the end of the semester. Now, as both Kate and Mike have alluded to, the wonderful thing about this technology is that it allows you to concentrate on what is truly important, and that's the individual student. It's been said many ways by smarter people than me, nothing matters unless you're connecting with the student, and it's got to be you. That's what we get paid for. So all of this extra time that we now had, didn't have to prepare a class for delivery, didn't have to mark anything. We could now spend that 2-hour class helping the students who came in looking for help, and those were probably the ones who really needed some help. Or, on top of that, we could spend a lot of time looking at the wonderful analytics that all the My Labs give us and contact individual students, either as a group or as whatever. And it's not just calling somebody or emailing somebody saying, hey, a PowerPoint test is next week, you haven't done anything, giddy up, let's go. It could be encouragement as well to somebody doing well. Oh, I've noticed you've done your 2 lab assignments and you've got perfect on them, you're ready for the test, good on you. Either way, we found very clearly that that little bit of personal contact between the student and the teacher was really, really helpful. Sometimes that's all it takes is that little nudge. The word test is in 2 weeks, you haven't done much. You think maybe, yeah, boom, and then they kick in and they start going. And they would come back to the teacher after and say, if you hadn't sent that email, that kind of fun thing. So when you have a lot of time to concentrate on your students, you can help them a whole bunch more than if you're marking the same old test 80 different times, and then you move on to your other section and you're marking the same old test 80 different times. The analytics help you do a whole bunch of fun things. So that went well, actually. That went really, really well. We had great marks. Marks were going up really, really high. And then we decided to come up with a retention policy, because sometimes you just don't get to where you need to go. And what we put in place was that any student who had written all 3 tests and who scored between 45 and 49% would have the opportunity to redo the last test, the Excel test. And if they scored 70% on the test they pretty much had written just a week ago, then we would bump their mark up to 50 for a pass. Now, that was still with the teacher, and the individual teacher had the final word. Just because they wrote 3 tests doesn't mean they were good students. The teacher would look at all of the records, and if you had been practicing, if you had attempted some, because we go through the analytics, and it's, you embarrass the hell out of kids because I know they don't lie, but they'll look at you and they'll say, yes, yes, I did everything, and I'm bringing up their history on my computer, and just before the report pops up, I'll say, I don't want to embarrass you now. You really have been working. Yeah. And I opened it up and I said, whoa, you spent 7 minutes and 23 seconds on this course all semester long. Oh, well, I thought I had whatever. So the teacher at that point can say, well, no, you just showed up for 3 tests and you failed. Sorry. But if somebody had been trying and somebody you must have at the very least written all 3 tests, you get a chance to redo the Excel test. That has saved quite a few students, but we have had students walk away from this deal. Simply because I was never called a communist. We don't do that in Canada. We say something much friendlier. I don't know what it is. But, I had students say, well, hang on, if I score 87% on my second Excel test, shouldn't that bring my mark up to like 60? Well, no, you don't even get to redo the test, but if you do, you'll get 50, you'll pass. And some students didn't see the logic in that and said, well, I'm not doing that, and failed the course. I don't know.
As they should.
Well, exactly. But I think everybody deserves a safety net, a second chance, if they've given you the effort that they should. And we have retention policies all over different programs, as I'm sure you do. We've had the distinction, and I don't know if it's a blessing or a cross to bear, but we, in Ontario, there are 24 colleges, and the province does a province-wide survey of all the colleges. They're checking for student satisfaction, employer satisfaction, how many students get a job in their field within the first 6 months of graduation, those kinds of things. There are 6 broad categories. At Niagara College, we've won student satisfaction. It's either 9 out of the last 10 or 8 out of the last 9 years. And that's in no small measure as to why we've grown so much in the last 5 years. It's a pretty good marketing tool, and we use it for what it's worth. But I think one of the things that helps drive that is that we do try to help our students out as much as we can. And we come up with some type of retention policy based on whatever, and if you're using any MyLab, it's very easy to come up with the history of what the student has been doing and what's possible and whatever. So that's really helped us an awful lot. So these next few slides are stuff that we show the students in their first class at orientation, because as soon as you mention to some people that you really only need to be in class for the 3 tests, you start hearing the whispers about, are you going to the pub? And, ooh, I got a spare, and all of that fun stuff. But when we try to explain to them the importance of actually doing the training exercises so that they can feel comfortable with my IT lab and the type of work they need to do, because the exams are the same thing as the training exercises, we try to explain to them how it's going to help. And so we've come up with these numbers over the last few years. Should I do the training exercises? Well, the students who completed the students who did not complete the training exercises, there are the scores that they get on the test. And I should break this down at some point when I have more time and figure out what percentage of that are people who took the training more than one time. But this is at least, or these are nobody. Nobody did any of the training exercises. PowerPoint, I think, demonstrates it's the easiest one. And then I think what happens is they write the PowerPoint test and they say, no problem. And then they come into Word and it's like, whoa, wow, life happens. And then Excel is the most challenging one because it's got that dirty M word attached to it. Everybody thinks math, not Excel. But there's the very noticeable difference between those students who attempt at least once to do the practice exercises before they come in and do the test. And you can see what happens in Word. It almost doubles. It does double. Goodness. And Excel, the one that had been challenging for years, even in the old way we used to do, the average mark wasn't 86. I believe it was in the low 70s. I was going to try to find a way of meshing the 2 marks together to show you the difference between the old way and the new way, but since it was 2 courses, now it's 1. I don't know. Yes, Rose?
Yeah, the puzzle pieces, you can't Excel with the ugly M word.
Yeah.
And with without the training, they can only get 41%.
Yeah.
Do you think that the issue is that they come as thinking that, oh, I know how to do this, this is just a piece of cake? I mean, they have
Absolutely.
overconfidence and that's where they fail?
Absolutely. I think it's both those things, which you just mentioned and what I had mentioned earlier. I think they got a false sense of security with how well they did on PowerPoint without studying, so I should be able to carry it through. And then they think Word is just like sending a text. And then you say, well, let's create a table of contents. Let's put in a footnote. Let's back. What? Can you number your pages? Can you? Whoa! All of a sudden, it's whatever. But yeah, it's a big part of that. I already know Word. Well, how many? Anybody teach computer application type?
And they all say they know it.
Yeah, I know computers. I know this. I know that. Well, the marks don't necessarily show it. So then there's our wine education, or wine visitor and education center. We gave it a really fancy name. That's where we sell the stuff and it's very, very nice. Then here's our Redesign. The percentage of students who earned at least 80% on their practice exercises and passed the exams. And this past fall. I have these numbers for this past fall. So they did their practice exercises no matter how many times they repeated them. But they got 80% on their PowerPoint exercises or more, 80% on their Word or more, 80% on Excel. This was their exam scores. This is remarkable. I mean, it's across the top. It's almost perfect. And granted, a lot of these people just knew the stuff before, but if you just did your training exercises once, twice, 3 times, and I've seen people take it 15 times. They just wanted to get it that right. But when you do put in the extra effort, when you do take accountability or responsibility for your own education, in this course, the results are dramatic. And over the last 4 or 5 years, on average, this is what we get overall. And again, because I can't mesh the 2 courses together, our Excel course, which was the standalone course in the 2nd or 3rd semester, the average mark was in the low 60s. And for PowerPoint and Word, I believe we were in the mid to higher 70s. But when only 6%, 7% of your students fail a course, basically a self-study course, it's pretty dramatic. And we get a lot of people who come in and tell us that they were scared to death of computers. And when you have somebody who's scared to death of computers, you say, no problem. We're going to teach you how to work with computers, but you're going to do it on your own on a computer. It's a little disconcerting. But it doesn't take them long to catch up and get the results that they were hoping for. Rose.
Well, okay, I'm thinking of that because I need to know about this particular group of stuff. You have 7% that did not pass. Define for me that passing B and F, or is B passing?
Yeah. At college, it's 49% and lower is a fail. I don't know what that translates into your scale.
So for us, it has to be 70%. 69% of you guys failing first.
Okay.
So
I'd have to find out exactly where to cut this one.
okay, and the
But-
other piece is, the other question that I have to do is this. Passing is awesome, but I also need to know about retention. Retention is really important.
Yeah.
And overall GPS as well. I mean, so you're telling me that you have 47% of the students who have about an A average, well, that's a very good. But how many of those people who started the first day of review are there the last day of this, what I would like to know?
Right.
What is your percentage?
That's interesting. I'd have to dig that up. But the Excel test is the last 2 weeks of the semester, so if they wrote the Excel test, which is worth 50% of the marks, they were there the whole semester. You're looking for the drop rate or the withdrawal rate?
Yes.
I'm going to guess, and that's all it is. It's not more than 5%. It's not more than 5%.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is actually good.
I guess there's a whole bunch of things that come into that. It's almost a self-paced course, and you'll see here in a minute where we're going with this in the future. the student clearly knows there is nobody to blame for anything that goes wrong with this course. That's not fair. What am I trying to say? If you fail the course, there's no one to blame but yourself. Because ultimately, when we do get some students, the appeals, by the way, now that we had that many before, there are no more appeals. There are no more. Some student will come in, I got 33%, the teacher this, that test, the computer, I hate you, I hate your mother, I hate, okay, great. Let's take a look at how much work you put in the course. You spent 4 minutes on Excel for 15 weeks. What happens when you spend 4 minutes studying for a test in another class? You expect that to be different? Oh, it's the computer this, it's the computer that, sorry. It's reality like a 2x4 in the head. Look, this is you. What do you want? So they don't. I used to get chairs, coordinators calling me. Well, I'm really concerned about my retention rate, and a couple of students here who failed your course, and they say this, and I just send them a copy of the history of the particular student. They don't even call anymore. So they even tell the student, I'm sure if I was to call Professor Roy, you didn't put too much effort into this. And that's what it is. And it's a rude way to have this thrown at you for the first time, but it is the first semester. We do offer the course every semester. We do have a night course available in the winter semester for somebody who may want to catch up or whatever. But ultimately, what I like to tell the students when I show them these numbers, if you want to fail, you're going to fail. If you want to pass, you're going to pass. If you want to pad your average, boy, are you in the right classroom. Give it a little work. It doesn't have to be a whole bunch. Now, what did we learn? Well, structure is a pretty important thing in a very young adult's life. You can't just open up the door and say, have a field day. Do it whenever you want to. They will never do it. So, by giving them dates to be prepared to write their tests, we immediately improve things tremendously. They now knew they had to be ready by this. And yes, absolutely, most of the studying is done the week before the test and what have you, but at least it's done, where in the past it wasn't at all. So that's still getting where we want to go. And one thing that we found out in spades is that the more involved the teacher is with the student based on the data we have of the student, the more impact the teacher has. And the student appreciates it. We've had so many students who would have failed if it had not been for an email or the student coming in to ask a question and the teacher sitting down and looking at the history and saying, oh my God, the test is next week and this is the first time you've even been in my IT lab. Let's do this and make sure you've got that. We still get a couple of students who show up the day of a test and say, what's my access code? Really? We'll help them out. We have master lists, but it takes up 10, 15 minutes of your test time. However, what I really liked is the congratulatory emails. I think a student who's struggling is expecting to hear from a teacher saying, wow, let's go. But a student who has done well, especially in a class where you may see your teacher 3 times in a semester, getting an email saying, wow, I just noticed you did all your word exercises and you did them once and you got, they love that. It is so encouraging to them. Not that they needed it, but I think they like the fact that even though we don't see you every day, we know what you're doing, and good on you. I love that a whole whack. The text we use is an e-text. You can download it. It's fully interactive. You can highlight it. You can put bookmarks in it. You can put sticky notes in there on the margin and have a whole bunch of fun. And it's theirs. They keep it. Off you go. I think they really, really like that. As for an ebook, they don't really look at it a whole bunch. And as you well know, in any of my lab, it will tell you the page number to go and read about more information or what have you. But in my experience of students who have talked to me about the ebook, they're the ones who did go and read up on a certain part of it, and they said it helped tremendously. Could they do it without the ebook? Yeah, I think probably a huge majority does it already without the ebook. But here's kind of what we're looking for. Next January, we're going to pilot an online version of this course, where there will be a teacher. They will be keeping track of everything that's going on, but everything is online. There won't be a classroom. There'll be professor hours, come in, talk, or email, whatever. The difference between what we're doing now and this is that the tests will also be given online. We're still going to keep that structure to start off with. The test is due on this date. Make sure you've practiced and whatever. But we want to move it that way for a whole bunch of reasons. Probably the most obvious one is how many more lab spaces can we make available if we don't tie anything up at all with what's going on, to see where this is going. And I think ultimately that my IT lab certainly is made for this kind of thing. I'll let you know. And then what we're going to do in September of next year is we're going to pilot a self-directed course where it's all the student. And you can then at that point still need to write the tests on certain days, certain dates or whatever. It's the only control we have because we can make the test available on a day and whatever. But there won't necessarily be a teacher sending out emails or saying giddy up or whatever. But in part of the $50 million we're about to spend, we're going to create a test center, whatever, computer center, where if you are having an issue, you can come in and we'll have some people there, be it a peer tutor or what have you, that can help answer those questions. Yep.
So, I'm going to use the ugly word. So you're basically doing a MOOC.
I just thought it's a dirty N word too.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't think that there's students having a
Yeah.
We have some students that went international and they created a soil because we put in this book, so they have a student online here.
Okay.
Is that what you're doing?
I guess, yeah. You know, I never thought of it in those terms. The reason I don't think it in those terms is because it's not going to be offered to the whole world. It's just to our students. But yeah, essentially,
But it's still massive.
it's still, well, yeah, 3,000 people. I guess it's pretty big. Pretty big. Is there anybody else here from Canada? I don't think it's going to work.
Okay.
But that's what they want to try. I think we're going to stick with the online version when everything is said and done. For a whole bunch, because everything that's worked well with what we're doing is because there's been that teacher contact. And the MOOC, and I think that's the difference too, because the MOOC, there's still a teacher there somewhere or something, but here with what we want to do, if it works, and the launch date is January 2016, there'll be that drop-in center if you have an issue. And it really won't even be a teacher, more than just somebody to explain what part of my IT lab are you having. We don't need to teach how to learn Word, Excel, and what am I missing? PowerPoint. My IT lab does that just fine. Thank you very much. Hey, we got videos, we got demonstrations, we got show me, we got int, we got, my God, we don't need somebody to show them how to use or how to learn the software. We need somebody to make sure that they're comfortable with the software. So that's the budget cutting reasoning behind my schools trying to go this route. But I think it's going to be mostly online, and it's still going to give them the cuts that they want and save the space that they want. But they've been impressed enough with how this has worked to even want to attempt this. And while we are the new direction and the government in Ontario wanting more of an online presence, more blended courses and what have you, this is one that we're going to take as this is the one that we feel comfortable enough that is going to be successful. But like I say, I'm a little leery of that last step. Let's try it. Let's try it. Who knows? And then we get into adaptive technology and all of that fun stuff, and maybe it becomes easier or not. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But I look forward to letting you know, and I'm not religious, but I may start to pray, because if it's like our launch of this thing, I will never live through it, because That first year was just a disaster, just a disaster. Make sure you get structure. Make sure the teachers care about their students and do the contact. And granted, some of the emails would sound like form letters because you're saying the same thing to a group of your people, so you just fire it off to the same people or whatever. But that contact, that knowing the teacher is still there looking and is willing to help and more than willing to congratulate you and do something well, that's the big difference. And the My Labs allows the teacher the time to be able to do that. Any other questions? Yeah.
I was wondering if anybody had any ideas for catching those students in the middle, because I'll send out those, good work, you're doing doing what
Yeah.
you're supposed to do, and then the, far other end, those people in the middle that maybe with a little more effort could do better, but they're passing. And so I always feel like, I get this, sometimes if I do try something, well, I'm passing the class, what else do you want, kind of response. So like, do I just leave those people alone, kind of in the middle, or kind of doing what they're, I wonder if anybody has ideas.
And granted, I'm not doing as much teaching as I used to because I'm involved in other projects at the college, but I would make that a challenge to myself to see if I can't move, that critical mass of people who are just happy that they're passing.
Yeah.
You've all had it, right? The student comes into your office. What's my mark so far? I have 51. Okay, see ya. I'm just here to pass. I hope you're never my doctor.
Well, to that point, after like every task, I use that email feature in my accounting lab to email out students. So I email students who get A's and I say, great job, probably gave up something fun to, study and get that A, keep up the good work. And I email students who fail and say, obviously whatever you're doing, you don't need to continue doing it. That was not a good plan, and you can come by my office. But I try to come up with something for like the B students. I'll say, email them and say, you did pretty well, and a B is a good grade on the test. But here are some things, that could take you from a B to an A. Kind of try to point out some of the tools that are out there, because I think that's our job. Our job is to say, this is the path to being a good student. And students really like those emails. And the challenge is to try to make it generic enough that you can send it to the whole group of them and have it feel to them like it was personal, but not have to write a separate, that would be really nice to write separate personal emails to all your students every week, but inefficient. But I think that does make a difference. Like, if you did this, you did the homework. If you just do the homework, you're going to do this. But maybe you can spend some time in the study plan, or.
I feel your frustration. I've actually had a student who I sent an email and said, why don't you just come to class next week? We'll sit down and I'll sit with you. And the response was, you said I only had to show up for 3 tests. Hey, I don't have an answer for that. Some people just aren't going to, but you try, right? I think we all try. That's what we want. We're all type A personalities. That's why we're here. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
I'll let Mike introduce this next section. While he's getting set up, I will tell you, I was telling Kristen, she's got to tell me when she goes home to Columbus. I was told that at Christmas time, when you fly into Columbus, Ohio, it said, welcome to Ohio, unless you're from Michigan. Swear, I heard they had that up at Christmas time. You can appreciate that.
How do I get this computer back?
Rose, do you know how to get his computer back up on the
Sorry, I didn't hear the question. I was like, why is everyone looking at that?
Did it just disappear? I want to see it go. That's the expensive part, right? Was it really? Really, the whole thing goes, oh my God.
Plus, I can make this one.
Yeah, it's no button to open it up.
The picture didn't work, I had to let her out.
There was nothing to do with it.
Ours is better than ours.
Yeah, but it wasn't as good as it's done the same problem, right? That's bizarre.
It's coming.
I mean, I was in there. They could get in so much trouble for that. Exactly. Oh my goodness. In a brand new building.
That's true. Yeah. The idiot complaint.
We just pressed a bunch of buttons.
Yeah, that's what I do. Final step.
Okay, so I was gonna say the next presenter needs no introduction, but that's coming. Yeah, so I'm back. So what I want to do now is talk a little bit, not about how to design a course, but kind of best practices in using the technology. And, you know, it was discussed before that each of you have seen a copy of this book or is available, and some best practices listed in there. Some of these I'll talk about. Some of these are actually kind of a list of best practices that the economics people who are here put together as well. So it's not just a laundry list that I'm going to give you. It's a lot of it is going to be also kind of interpretation. We can think a little bit about some of these things. And I stole Kristen's Steve Jobs comment, so you've seen this already. But I think it's partly because it's great jumping off from what she was talking about earlier, but also about the fact that here's a guy who wanted to put a computer on everybody's desk in every office building, school, home in the world. Yet basically what he's saying is that the most important piece of information, most important learning tool in the classroom is still the instructor. Right? So really the idea here is that yes, technology is great. We always want to do technology. We want to add technology. But throwing technology into a classroom does not solve problems. In fact, oftentimes, many of you probably know, a lot of you actually raise your hand and say I use it, technology can create as many problems as it solves if it's not used correctly. Right? Something to the effect of, you know, we know just enough to be dangerous. Well, we want to make sure you do this right. So what I want to do is talk a little bit about is kind of walking through a classroom and some ideas in a semester is in terms of using technology. Right? So getting started, kind of thinking about, like we talked before, about incentives and how to structure your course, assessment. But then I was big of a user of the MyLabs, which were in many ways created to do stuff outside of the classroom. I use them as much in the classroom as I do outside of class. So my students are constantly getting bombarded with my econ lab, right? For a couple of reasons. One, I want them to use it outside the classroom. But two, I think there's a lot of tools that we can use in the classroom, okay? The classroom's loose, defined as anytime, any place you need, right? So kind of to begin with, and for some of you who are new, or some of you may remember this, or some of you may be switching programs, or whatever it happens to be, Buy-in, right? Buy into the technology, right? For those of you who are deans or working with groups in kind of top-down sort of implementation, buy-in is important, okay? Put the effort in to learn, right? We all just listen to Andre talk about students not putting effort in to learn, and look, you got this and all that. Why would you not put the effort in to learn this stuff too, right? This is just as important. If you want to be a good role model to your students, put the effort in to learn this stuff, right? It's not that difficult, okay? Yes, there's a learning curve to anything, but putting the work in will solve the problem. The 5 Ps, right? Proper preparation prevents poor performance, right? Okay. It's not like the 3 Ps I often talk about in my lecture, right? Which some of you have heard before. What my students are doing while I'm lecturing, right? I'll say
Share.
Are we being taped? Posting on Facebook, poker, and then the third one. Right. So put the work in, right? Put the work in early, right? The other thing is don't show your students frustration. I have colleagues who adopted software technology, and they come to me because they know I do this thing. Oh, I get so frustrated in my class, I know what to do, et cetera. And I'm like, you do realize there's this thing called math phobia, right? Where people think they can't do math because essentially they picked up from their 2nd and 3rd grade teachers, who are partially 2nd and 3rd grade teachers because they don't like math, that they don't like math. And so now we have a whole generation of people who have math phobia. I'm like, students pick up on this. If you don't think that, if you're frustrated with technology, do your best to hide it or learn it and then not have to worry about frustration because they'll pick up on it and then you just got that many more fights, right? So the idea here is you gotta embrace it, you've got to buy in, right? Get frustrated with it, get to your office, close the door, then scream, that's fine, but don't do it in the classroom, right? You get frustrated with that, right? Don't get frustrated with the stuff that the students are paying for that their grade is kind of, they're using for a grade. Okay, so buy in, embrace it. Not alone, right? So here at Pearson, there's a tremendous amount of stuff that you can use. Training videos, trainings, MyLab sites, your local rep, the technology. There's a lot of stuff to help. You are not on an island, right? Even if you're, one of the few people using this or whatever, there's a tremendous amount of support to do this. This support has gotten better and better and better. There's a YouTube video for almost anything, right? My daughter and I rotate. She learns how to rainbow loom. I learned how to do some stuff in my econ lab and back and forth, right? That's what YouTube in our house is doing, right? Okay, she's actually mad at me for the 12 that she made for me. But the idea here is you're not by yourself, right? There's always someone who asks the question. There are no dumb questions, right? Learn a bit, watch some videos, and then don't ask a dumb question, ask an informed one, right? But there's a lot of help, okay? So use that, okay? The answer I get a lot, can I do a lot, or I used to run a lot of these training seminars are, can I do this? Yes. Okay? But it might take a little bit of thinking about how to do it, right? There's not always a button for everything, okay? But oftentimes, here's how. I know someone who's done this, or we've thought about it, or there's a workaround, we can get this done, okay? But typically, this gets back into the beginning, right? Think about this. Think about the preparation that you're going to do with the technology. Don't just throw the technology and say, I'm done, right? And many of you, that just makes the learning curve that much harder to deal with, okay? Right? So, the MyLab communities, the community TV, right? So there's a lot of how-to videos, right? How to do almost anything. So if you forget, quick run, do it, right? Okay? They're learning aids, just like the learning aids that are in the homeworks. Okay? So really, there's a lot of stuff that you can do. There's a lot of support here to help you master the program. Okay? So, start early. Like I said, I've set up courses for people 6 hours before they start. Went poorly. Not that surprising, right? Get in early, right? Depending on where you teach. I know my students, in their emails, 2 months ahead. Email them, get them started. You get started, right? Don't wait till the last minute. Right? So, give students time to prepare, okay? Asking students the first day of class, great, here we go. It's the first day of class, and it's Monday, and by Thursday, you've got to get in, you've got to get going, you've got to do all this stuff, and that counts in your grade. It's probably not all that fair. You wouldn't like that either. Right? Get them going early, right? I have about a quarter of my students who are logged into my econ lab that have done the first homework assignment, which is called Getting Started, right? And ask questions like, how many innings in a baseball game? How many inches in a foot, right? So my European friends, I'll give 9 and 12, right? I don't care. I don't care if you get them right. You got to learn how to draw the box and color it in. It's all about getting started. Get students started early as possible. right? Get them through. Yes, there's technology issues. Their computer setting is wrong. Every time they reinstall Safari on their Mac, they've got to hit another setting, right? Get students through this stuff early. You get through this stuff early, okay? The other thing is, I have a lot of students who have used other MyLabs before. My students come to me and say, are you using my econ lab? I'm like, why? Like, well, we heard it's good. Or more importantly, a lot of times, it's, well, we use my math lab, my finance lab, my this. I know how to do it. Those are the students that you now have in your classroom who are support for other students. Use them. They're your own MyLab TAs. Get them helping you, right? Word of mouth is really, really important because they may not come to me and have me try to work with them. They'll go find somebody else. So find those other students who've used it before, right? So this is the cognitive question. Why are you using the software? Right? Tell students that. Be really specific. Here's why I'm doing it. Right? My students thought it's because I don't want a grade. Right? I don't want a grade. They're right. Okay? But that's not why I'm using the software. Here's why I'm using the software. I send my students an email beginning of the semester. Here's how you pick the book. Right? All the different ways you get the book. Here's why I'm using the software. Right? I'm not simply charging you, making you pay more because I don't want a grade. Here's why we're doing. Here's the study plan. Here are the videos. Here's why I'm using it. Most students have no problem paying the extra money above and beyond the price of the book if they know they're going to use it, right? I remember your English class, you bought 13 books for the semester you had to read. You maybe got through 10 of them. Like, what did I do with the other 3? Right? That was my right? Why am I using it? Here's what I'm going to do. Here's why I think you're going to like it. Motivate. Get students interested in knowing what they're going to do with technology, right? A lot of them have used it. A lot of them have used technology before. They might be a little resistant. Here's what's going to help you understand why I'm using it. A little bit less resistant. Okay? When you make the change, or when you've adopted technology, when you're thinking about course redesign, right, what else is going to change? Right? These are kind of integrated circuits, right? One thing changes, the other thing's going to change. I change the incentive here. How are my students going to respond? The biggest thing is your syllabus. More and more times I see people throw technology, oh, I'm going to change this, I'm going to change the way I class, and don't bother to change their syllabus. Right? And you may laugh, but it happens. Everything I'm telling you here comes through webinars, right? It's like, oh, you now have incentives that are misaligned, right? And we all know that when there's this tiny little loophole, students will try to drive a truck through it, right? And so recognize what you're doing. What else is going to change in your classroom? Is it the actual presentation in the face-to-face class? Is it the structure of your syllabus? Is how you're testing? How are you running? Hybrid, whatever. Think about the ramifications. Step 2, step 3, step 4. Like Andre said, right? This is perfect, right? Halfway through that first time, you're like, we've got a problem, right? Perfect. They figured it out quicker than a lot of other people who realize at the end of the semester things don't add up, right? This is great, right? Think about what's going to change. Right? The other thing too is, I tell my students, when you sign up for my account, I do not take your payment. The last thing in the world you ever want to know, or I want to ever be accused of, or you want to ever be accused of doing, is giving your professor money. Right? I have nothing to do with the payments. I am also not your tech support system. Okay? And this is really important. Because a lot of students we know would rather fire an email off to you saying, hey, it doesn't work, than actually put in the 30 seconds to figure out what it is. With the support system that Pearson has, and really frankly most of technology, send the email links to them. Here are the 5 common problems my students have, right, that I figured out over time. 1, you forget to clear your browser. 2, you still have to do this. Here's the link. You get this error, I know exactly what it is, here's the website. I send it to you the first day of class. You now have a list of all the most common errors that are going to happen. Give it to them. Here you go. Run through this list before you talk to me. Because what I'm going to then tell you to do is actually go to tech support. Okay? I can't fix your computer. Okay? So, think about what we've been talking about. Essentially this, right? I love this cartoon. Right? How many times have you told your students this? Right? No, you don't get extra credit at the end of the semester. No, I don't do this. No, I don't do that. No, I don't do this. It's where it's in the syllabus, right? So why make sure that your technology policies are in your syllabus? Lay it out. Lay it out more from. Don't let the computer be the issue in the class. It's in the syllabus. It's in the syllabus. It's in the syllabus. Right? Okay? The other thing, of course, is you are not the technology expert. Right? Let Pearson handle that. Right? Okay? I tell my students right away, sorry, I can't help you. Sometimes I tell them this. Take a screenshot of your computer. How many times have you had, my computer wouldn't let me do this? Really? It wouldn't let you do what? What does it say? Well, it says it doesn't work. No, it didn't. It doesn't say on the screen, it doesn't work. Right? No, tell me what the error is. All of you have better phones than I do, at least until last year when I actually got a little iPhone. Take a screenshot. Send it to me. Show me what it actually says. Right? Oh, it says that. Which didn't say just it doesn't work. Here, this is probably what it is. Go back to the thing I told you about. Or here, I've already emailed you about this. Or, oh, this is what you've got to do. Do this, right? I'm not the IT guy for Pearson, but 95% of the issues that I see are picnic problems, right? Problem in chair, not in computer, right? It's the user that is kind of basically just like, I don't get it, right? Okay? Put the onus on them to do the work. That will solve your technology problems very, very quickly. Okay? And get them done and get them solved. Right? So I talk to my students a lot. The first day of class, I go through and show them the software. Right? I walk them through it. I show them the second day of class because a lot of times the kids can't show up the first day of class. Right? Show them where the support link is. Show them to check the browser. Show them that this happens. Show them that this happens. Go through. And yes, students might not completely remember, right? 5% of what we say in class gets remembered. But if I keep on showing them this, right? And say, look, here's the issue. If you've got this issue, you've got this, this is where the stuff is, right? Go do it, okay? This program is used by hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people a year, right? Is vetted. The issue is, we can solve these problems pretty quickly, right? So that's kind of the getting started. Right? Some of the technical stuff. Buy in, be strong and forceful with your students in terms of we're using it, you don't get any wiggle room, the technology works, go solve the problem yourself. We start talking about getting started in terms of writing assignments and creating things. One of the really nice things in my labs is that a lot of the books already have pre-built assignments. There's a multiple choice homework and quiz written for every chapter of the book already. You can edit it. You can add questions. You can delete questions. You can delete the assignment if you want. But it's a great way to get started. Some of the older versions of the books in economics, I did it. It's not done by, sorry, Kristen. It's not done by Kristen, right? Or anybody in marketing. They're not the ones picking questions. If it's in IT, it's IT professors. If it's in accounting, it's accounting professors who went through and picked the questions and wrote the homeworks and quizzes for these books. Use them. Try them. See what you think. Halfway through, week 3, you're like, I'm done with that, I don't want to use it anymore. Fine. Right? But it's a great way to get started, right? Helps you over the learning curves in writing assignments. Right? Copy a course from semester to semester. Once you dial a course in and say, okay, this is what I really like, copy it from semester to semester. Right? I do know faculty who copy it from semester to semester to semester. And for the 2 years that the book hasn't been updated, they don't do another thing. It's fine. I mean, I tweak mine, but for the most part, you can do this. Okay? Find a way you like, find a structure you like, copy it from one semester to another. You can copy other people's courses. I can copy your course if I want. If you're willing to let me have it. Which happens quite a bit. Right? Hey, I like the way you did that. Copy it. Right? But there's a lot of things you can do to, once you get it right, once you think like you're done, like Kate said, why do we like lecturing? Because it's comfortable. Right? We feel comfortable. Once you've got a course that you like, don't reinvent the wheel every semester. Right? Okay. Getting back to some of these issues of incentives and syllabi, one of the things that Kate mentioned, Kristen mentioned, was how much should the technology play a role in your class? And kind of the standard answer has always been, 10% of the grade. Why? Because the average person, 90% is the cutoff for an A. You don't do my econ lab or the my lab, you can't get an A in the course. It's fine. How many of your students really want an A? 2/3 of my students only want a CB. They just want to pass. This means absolutely nothing to them because they weren't aiming for an A anyways. What are they looking for? They're looking to pass the class, right? They raise their hand and say, all I want is a CV, I'll sign it and get rid of it. So my thought is, this is one of the best practices, my thought is, why not a little bit higher? Make it hard to actually pass the class without using the software. Right? You don't get it. Now, the best you can do is an 80% by class, which means basically you're at that CV. Congratulations, you've given yourself no wiggle room to pass the class. Right? If you think the technology is worth using because students are going to learn from it, make them use it. 10% is enough. I don't think. Okay. 20%, as you saw, since I test online now, my econ lab stuff is almost 90%. But when you're first adopting or you're thinking about this, especially if you're not testing online, you still want to make this worth something, right? The problem, of course, is the more you put emphasis on the technology, 20%, that just means you're going to get more pushback from students who are trying to figure out a way to not use it and still pass the class, right? So remember that. The higher the bar, the higher the hurdle, the more students want to dig underneath it and get around it, right? So think about this. Start at 10%, work up. Figure out some number that works for you, okay? But in general, think of a number that's going to have some teeth to it. Make it a credible threat. You need to use this. You're going to learn from it if you use it, right? But I have a colleague who often talks about the fact that you can lead a horse to water and you can drown it, but you can't always make it drink, right? Kind of drowning them, right? Here, you're going to use it, right? But because they won't think you're big from themselves, right? So think this in mind. One of the issues, obviously, is how much do you want to use the technology? Okay. Making it more active in the classroom, right? Whether it's 30 students, 20 students, 275 students, whether it's online or not, right? You still want an interactive classroom, whether it's online. You don't want 275 people that don't feel a connection, right? And one of the issues we have at Western with online classes, and what we're trying to make them as online classes and not MOOCs, is that there has to be a significant portion of Western faculty who are participating in the class. I need to be active. Okay, so how active am I, right? Well, giving quizzes, getting feedback, right? Okay. Constantly kind of recapping material, lots of things you can do in the classroom using My Econ Lab, whether it's online, face-to-face, whatever, right? Okay. To have you add content so that the student feels like, yes, they're doing work, but yes, they're getting feedback from you to make it more personal. Okay. A lot of times what ends up happening is we'll do a lot of these pre-lecture quizzes like I've done, right? And simple, 5 minutes before class, right? I know what students are doing. I know the 4 questions everybody's having a hard time with. Those are the start of my lecture, right? Use the technology to guide your lecture, okay? So if you're thinking about flipping a classroom, which is a popular thing right now, I don't think many people actually want to do that. It's not an easy thing to do. But flip a day. Have a quiz, have some lecture, and then have that lecture one day, maybe every other week or every once a month. That's what you're going to do. See how it works, right? Before you go in and put the whole onus of your class on your students, right? You want to flip the classroom really is, right? I don't think students really want that, right? I have students who sit there and tell me that I'm teaching online right now, that their mind in online courses, we wait till the last second and then do absolutely everything. In my mind, online courses, you're not sitting in a classroom, but you're still doing everything every week. The student response was, well, that's too much like a real class. I'm not sure if the emphasis was on too much or real, but the point was, wait a second, right? Get them content. Think about if you're going to flip it, what the incentives are, right? And try it. Okay, but you can use the software to do those sorts of things. Okay. And so, like I talked about before, if you're going to do this, you're going to really kind of adopt the technology and dive in. What kind of work are you going to do? Typically, you think of kind of low stakes, sort of speed bump, constant assessment where you're at, some higher stakes, homework, some quizzes, extremely high stakes, tests, right? Continual work, you're allowed to do, right? It's easier to do. Okay. The one thing I will tell you is most of my students respond better to a consistent work schedule. Get a schedule and stick to it. Students like structure, don't, they do, right? And having this sort of constant reminder that they have something due at a particular time can really be done. You can use the prerequisite function, you can turn the due dates off and on. There's lots of things you can do with the technology, right? Just get a consistent schedule. I talked about the prerequisite function, which I think is really interesting, and those of you who technology may not have seen this before, especially it's not, to my knowledge, in most of the other course management systems. This actually allows you to dictate when students do work and in what order. You can make homework 1 the prerequisite for homework 2. You can actually make homework 1 and 2 the prerequisite for quiz 1. Right? There's lots of things you can do here, and not only can you do that, right, anything that you write in a MyLab can serve as the prerequisite for something else. You can actually put a minimum score. So you need to get an 80% to get to the next thing. Or you need to do this before you get to that. Or this and this. There's also an or feature in there too. This can get really, it could get out of hand, right? But you can do this or that to get to this. Or this and this, or this and this. Yeah, you get the point, right? But it's really nice because it allows you to dictate, especially for those teaching online. Right? This is what I want you to do. I want that structure. It allows a really nice feature. The other thing too about that is we use prerequisite. If you're going to use a score, what kind of score do you want? What kind of hurdle do you want? I started with 70% on assignments, now I'm up to 80%. Do I want to go to 90%? I don't know, my students are already doing that, right? What kind of prerequisite minimum score do you want to use to do that? The higher, the better. Also the higher, the more likelihood you're going to have students just pressing A maybe to get the right answer, right? So there's a little bit of trade-off there. Use the learning aids as much as the students use the learning aids. Okay? So, like I said, use the email my instructor link. This is really fantastic. A couple of best practices, I think, with this. If you've got a lot of classes, or a large number of students, and you don't want to be constantly bombarded by your students' email, you can choose to send this to a different email. You can send it to your dean if you want. Right? I know a lot of people have 2 emails. They have their work email, and they have their Gmail, their Yahoo email, where these questions go, right? And all they do is they get up in the morning, they get to work, 8:30 in the morning, 9 o'clock in the morning, they open up that email. They answer all their students' emails from that night, they close it, they're done. 4:30, 5 o'clock, or maybe just the next morning, they open it up, answer those emails, close it. You're not getting constantly pinged by your students during the middle of the day. I don't know how many of you are like me, but my email pings, I go check it, right? So, if you're teaching a lot, you've got a lot of students, for doing this, send this to a different email, right? And then check it when you want. Create a consistent schedule. Create a consistent email schedule with your student, right? I give my students a 24/5 policy. I'll get back to you within 24 hours, 5 days a week. So you email me on Monday, I'll get back to you by Tuesday. Typically, if you email me Monday, I'll be back on Monday night. But you email me at 9:30 on Friday night, do not expect an answer by 10. And do not email me at 10:30, where's my answer, right? I'm like, I know I'm a professor, but I do have a life, right? I do have 2 kids and a wife, and guess what? Friday night, you guys are not necessarily number 1 on my list, right? Now, if the Bachelor's on, yeah, maybe I'm getting back to you, right? My wife gets something out of the hour, and I get something out of the hour, right? But the idea is create a policy for your students, because they expect you to respond quickly. We know that there's asymmetry in that. They don't get back to us right away. But say, listen, you email me, this is what I'm going to get back to you. So if you have a homework that's due at 11 o'clock on Friday night, right, which is the most common time for homeworks, I think, due, Friday night and Sunday night are the 2 most common assignment times for peers, right? Everybody's got to turn in right at the end, right? Like I tell you, my students start and they wait right to the end. I'm not there. So if you want to wait till the last minute, you have a question, or you want to wait till the last minute, you've got suddenly a technology issue, like, I'm borrowing my neighbor's internet, and it's down. Which I've had before, too. Go to Western, get to campus, right? It's not downloaded on your system. I can't answer those emails, and I refuse to answer those emails, right? But the other thing here, suppose you've got a student who emails you 9 times, right? This is what people used to fear of this. Oh, he's struggling on this question, sorry, this homework. He's emailed me 9 times. You know how many times I answer it? Once. The 9th one. Get your butt to office hours, right? I'll look at all the other ones, but if you've got questions, you've got your student emailing you constantly, we've got a problem that we need to solve. Now, if all of you email me on the same question, then I have a different issue, right? I probably forgot to lecture on the topic, right? Or something, right? So I can use the information, and I store this information. I can use the information from the email my instructor, because it tells me you're struggling and we got to work something out. Or we all are struggling and I've got to work something out, right? Because what I do then is I can take the information that I got from all those emails, and then the next time I ask that question, maybe the next semester, I use the add a tip and say, hey, remember, don't forget about this, or we talked about this on this day, or there's a twist here, remember, right? You can leave a hint for your students, right? Which is really, really nice. So you can use the data from the communication, much like you would in a face-to-face class, or from clickers, or whatever you're using. Use that information from the email my instructor. Just be consistent. Create a consistent email policy with your students. I tell my students, if you haven't tried the question, I don't respond to the email. Don't just simply say help. Right? Try it. Then I can help you. Then I can figure out what you're doing. Right? Okay. So that's a really powerful thing. I really like that piece of the software. You've seen the stuff that I actually focus on, the assessment piece, right? What kind of grades what kind of things are we looking to collect? Right? I collect time spent. Right? I collect what they've done in between exams, right? I actually look at now what they've done in between attempts on the exam. I take a snapshot at 9 o'clock on Friday morning when my exam opens up. Here's what everybody's done on the study plan. I take a snapshot at 11:59 Sunday night, or basically Monday morning. Here's what everybody's done on the study plan. Who worked on the study plan during the exam? Why not? I want to see if people are doing what I think they're doing, which is attempting, studying, coming back. Great. Okay? Do this sort of stuff, right? That's simply just a screenshot. It's really easy to do that you can use. Maybe it's not Pearson efficacy gets published in a white paper, but it shows you what your students are doing, right? Which I think is really powerful, because then you can take a look at these sorts of things. What are my students doing? How are they taking the test? Right? How often have we thought about how these students are taking the test, right? We know that typical student says, I'll start with question 1, then I'll do question 2, do question 3, which is usually the wrong way to attack a test. How are they looking at things online? Right? For those of you teaching online, taking tests online, how are they using the software to answer questions? So that's really important. There's lots of good stuff you can do with that, right? Study plan, like I said, time spent, right? Course pass rates. We talked about some of this. Like I said, the required homework score is a really, really good one. All this stuff, right? And this is the stuff I show my department chair. This is the stuff I show my dean. Look, this is what I'm doing. This is why we're doing it. Right? Okay. There's really important stuff for I think you can collect very, very easily. It doesn't violate any of the FERPA laws or any of the other stuff that may be there. Right? A lot of us raise our hands that we've been teaching for 20 years. So technology 20 years ago was, wow, there's 2 screens. And a light bulb that maybe didn't work anymore. Western at one point was Wired Magazine's 4th best wireless campus in the country. Because probably half of us had pulled the plug on most of the technology that was there, right? It was just ridiculous. They've since upped their technology quite a bit. But what I want to show you is that you can use it in the classroom, right? Everything I've showed you is kind of outside of class. What are students doing outside of class, right? So what do I use it in class? Well, I use the RSS feeds, right? The news feature in my econ lab, which is in some of the other business ones too. These are the current news articles. I was showing Alex, right? There was an article that was 25 minutes old, right? Look, students, this is why I'm testing you online, because I now get the equivalent of 2.5, 3 days back to talk about real events, current events. They're in the news that just popped up. Look what's going on, right? Okay? Preloaded news videos, which is great. ABC News, Financial Times, lots of stuff. For those of you who are interested, accounting, finance, this is mostly macroeconomics, there's real-time data. Basically, the St. Louis Federal Reserve Bank, as they update their data, that updates the questions that you use. So if you think about that the next time you open a textbook, and the textbook's got even a 2014, or probably close now, a 2015 publication date, and the data's from 2010. Oh, I'm trying to tell my MBA students, look at the data, and they're like, but the homework question says this. That solves this problem, right? The data updates. So if you actually look at the exchange rate data on Monday, it would be updated from today, right? Really, really quick stuff. So there's lots of good stuff to keep the course current, right? Item analysis, right? So this is, we've all kind of alluded to this a little bit. This is kind of the Sarah Palin gotcha, right? This is where the student comes in and says, I'm getting 100s on my homework, but only 50s on the quiz, right? Andre was alluding to this, right? Use the item analysis that the software gives you. I can look at it by student, I can look at it by classroom, right? And I'll go back here. So this is an item analysis screen, right? So I'm not showing you a real great book. This is reality for the soccer lineup from game last year. Right? I can see that Sergio Ramos here took 13 attempts to get through that question. Right? At what point did you not contact me and say, I don't get this question? Right? This is the aha gotcha. They commented, I get it, I'm doing really well. Like, no, you're not. It took you 13 times. Now, if you figured it out at attempt 13, great. But chances are, you just ran through the algorithm until you found the right question again and got the answer. Right? Okay? It took, what was it, 9 times to do this question. Looks like this question was harder. We go look at this. Right? Okay? So there's lots of good data that you can do very easily to say, wow, this is what my assignment looked like. Do I want to ask that question again next time? Right? Do I want to lecture on this again? Or do I want to show you that, no, you're not really working that hard. You just stay. Right? Okay. The news features, like I talked about, right? Lots of really good stuff there. It's kind of motivate the class, right? Once again, active learning, accountability, right? Motivate the class. I've got a lot of non-majors I want to motivate. Okay. Right? Real-time data analysis. Right? Is that synthesis? Right? These slides were made a little while ago, but they update like October 11th, right? Really, really quick. I go through that. I can show you those today. They'd be updated. Right? Okay. So one of the big issues, I think one of the best practices really that is you hear me talk about the fact that I show my students everything. Right? This is Orwellian Big Brother at its finest. That I have to describe Orwell as and who Big Brother is.
After communism.
After communism. And I can no longer use the Robinson Crusoe Gilligan example. Because, let's face it, no one knows Gilligan. Yeah, well, that one too, right? Yes. The point is, how much do you show your students that you know? I tell my students right away, I know everything that you're doing. I know when you've done it, I know how long you spent, right? I just don't know where you were sitting. That's about what I don't know, right? And the reason why I tell them that is because I want to be honest with them. My job is to not punish you with that data. My job is to help you with that. I'm not going to scream and yell that you didn't do the work. It's your grade. But I'm going to let you know that when you come in here and say exactly what Andre said earlier, I'm going to say, no, you're lying to me, right? Well, let's have a real conversation, right? Let's be accountable, right? So I know the time spent on everything, right? Okay? I actually show the correlation between time spent in my econ lab and performance on the first exam to my students the day after the first exam. Look, all of you who got A's, here's the average time spent on the study plan. All of you got B's, here's the average time. You don't believe that I told you to use it? Here, look what everybody else is doing, right? And he probably lied to you when he said, I didn't really study that much, right? Guess what? He did. He did study. And there's the reminder. So I show my students quite a bit. I think it's important for you to recognize and think about how much you want to show your students to motivate behavior. Yeah.
Your study plan, not everybody uses it.
Right.
Do you find your value in it?
I absolutely do. I absolutely do. The reason why I do it is this. I can ask only so many homework questions in a homework. But I tell them, listen, if you want more practice, go here. Here's the reason why. Right? The more you work on a particular type of question, the more likely you are to see that type of question showing in the exam. Right? The demand and supply curves only move in so many different ways. Right? So I can call the demand good avocados or oranges or bananas or whatever word you want to use. The more you practice that question, the more likely you are going to be ready to take this class. But if you don't want to do it, that's fine. I've got a homework that should prepare you well enough. But if you want to put the extra work in, great. The other thing, too, that I use for the study plan is I often use it in my clicker questions. what I've been told by students is that they know this. They know where we're lecturing. So guess what they're doing before they come to lecture? They're in the study plan trying to figure out which clicker questions I'm going to ask. So they get 2/3 of a point if they get the clicker question answered, and a full point if they get it right. So they're coming in doing a little bit of anticipatory work before the class. So I find that pretty nice too. Because, oh good, they've looked and see what I'm doing. They might not know the answer, but they're getting there. I find tremendous value in the study plan, but I leave it optional because I'm afraid of giving them too much.
Mike, do you ever set up an Oxford online?
Yeah,
How do you do it? I mean, how?
I tell them online, email me,
You know,
through
video.
the questions. You know, they'll often say, listen, 9 o'clock Sunday night I'll be around.
So you know.
Or whatever, I mean, there is a function in my econ lab that allows you to do online chat.
Do you give them some time, a time in which to?
Yeah, I'll tell them, I'm around this such and such time. Right, so I try to make it convenient.
Okay.
Can you explain what you meant by clicker questions?
So I use Clicker, which looks a little like that, and you can kind of poll your students. Throughout the day, throughout the class, I'll stop and have basically, here's a question, right? Have students answer the question. It's basically a way to get feedback from my students so they understand what I'm doing during the class. Usually I start off my day with a clicker question that's based on the topic that we covered the last lecture. So how much do they remember from that last lecture? It's just a way to try to tie things back in. And it's nice because it allows me to poll students. I get a histogram of what students are doing, but I also get a record of when every student responded so that I can go see who understands it and who doesn't.
So in the absence of any hardware, you can do something like survey monkey.
Right? Here's the gotcha moment, right? I had a student, it's hard to kind of see, but they got a 38 out of 42. They answered 42 questions in 8 minutes and 16 seconds. Really? Right? So these are the types of things that I think when you talk about the technology, using the software outside of the classroom or outside of the regular way, there's lots you can do. When I test online or you do quizzes online, when do you give students the answers? Is an often big sort of kind of idea. When do I let students see their answers? Typically, I let students see the answers only after the due date. The problem, of course, is in a lot of things, if there's a person or two that have ADA compliance sorts of requirements where they get extra time, your due date has passed, their due date has not. You get to see the answers. They don't yet. So basically, there's a response in there. When do you get to see the student answers, right? I turn it to never, which sounds horribly harsh, but of course I can change that. Once I know everybody's done, I change it back to after the due date and everybody can see their scores. So if you've got issues about kind of asymmetric due dates, right, for things, or you've got multiple sections of classes and things are due on, this is due on Tuesday, they're due on Wednesday, you can control the feedback on tests and quizzes, right? Which I think is really, really important. So there's lots of test security. So, we talked a little bit about this. Treat your students like third graders, right? Talk to them. Congratulate them on a good exam, right? Don't just yell at them for not working, right? So there is a function which is unfortunately hidden in the MyLab programs, which I think is one of my second favorite functions. It's called Search Email by Criteria. Basically, students log in, you've got an email from them, you can create email distribution lists by simply choosing a category. I want to look at overall score, I want to see who has not done any work in the last 10 days. Easy, find out, send them an email. It looks personalized, clearly isn't, but students respond to that. My students respond very positively and say, hey, great job. You got an A on this test, you're one of only 20 in a class of 275 that got an A, or whatever, right? Wow, good, right? Our department used to send out letters at the end of the semester to all the people who got A's in the class. Please come be a major, right? Well, I don't have to do that. We send the emails out. Right? It's really nice. Treat your students like third graders. My daughter gets a shiny gold star on her paper when she comes home, right? Goes on the refrigerator. Students remember that, right? They think you're keeping an eye on that. Even though clearly in a class that big, I only know 3 people's names. Right? Does that remind them you don't want to know why I know 3 people's names, right? So, the one thing I want to tell you is the technology gives you a lot of options. Okay? Couple things. I've talked about starting small and building up. create a shadow course or a sandbox, a place you can go play, right? As long as you don't give your students the course ID, you can do absolutely anything in there. So create a course, try a homework assignment, see what you think. Hey, I like this, is great. Then simply copy it over to the course that the students actually have access to. They never saw you deleting questions, adding a homework, deleting a homework. Nothing crazier than adding and deleting homework while the student's on, who then emails you like, what are you doing, right? Find a place to go play. Find a shadow course, right? I probably have 50 courses in my course roster. Kirsten doesn't care, right? As long as I've got, as long as only students can see the one that they need to see, we're good.
They were talking about this the other day. I mean, the access code that they have will give them the ability to go into another course.
No, so I don't want them to go to another course, right? So they get an access code for their class. That works for the one that they've logged into, right? But I can create another course, right? Using the same book and everything else like that. But they don't have access to that. But I can copy everything I've done in that shadow course over to the one they have access to.
That's for you.
Yeah, it's for me. Yeah, no, this is for me. This is for me. Contact students as soon as possible, right? Especially those of you who have students with payment issues, all that. Don't let financial aid be a burden, right? Pearson allows, 14 or 17-day access, temporary access. What you will find is students will take 14 days under John Smith, and then 14 days under Mike Ryan, and then 14 days under John Doe, and suddenly you've got 3 extra people in your grade book, right? You cannot merge them. You cannot merge grades between people. So I tell my students, if you're going to take the temporary access, when you go to pay, you have to use that username and password. You have to log into that person. You create another person, I don't know who you are, and I do not merge grades. Right? Don't try to take the class for free. Right? But get students logged in first. Create a getting started homework, like I suggest. I call it homework 0. Don't make it worth any points, but make it a prerequisite for the first thing that does count. So if you don't get in and get over the login and any browser issues and all these other things by a certain time, you don't get to do the first thing that does count. So I'm kind of shooting with real bullets right away. Even though the first thing doesn't count, it's a prerequisite for the first one. Use the default options, right? There's lots of defaults. Use those. Don't tinker with those. Those work, right? And like I said, kind of sum up again, there's a lot of support. Use it. You're not on an island. A lot of people feel that once they've adopted technology, they're kind of on an island. So, kind of run through the best practices between the econ people and the FTC people. Any questions? Thank you.
Do we want a short break, everyone, or do you want to fly through this topic? I'm feeling that we want to keep going.
So Tegan is our new technology specialist.
So free access for 14 days?
2013.
Thank you very much.
We're going with the clicker. This is really exciting. Okay, so I think I've met some of you. For those who I haven't yet met, my name is Tegan, and I work with Belinda and Alex as their learning technology specialist. So what that means is, generally speaking, I know a little bit more about the back-end technology and help troubleshoot things. And if your instructors need training or implementation, I can help arrange that. So I know we've heard a lot about redesigning your course from Kristen's group, the efficacy group, and on my end, it's a little bit more about implementation, just generally what I do. But today, I was hoping to speak about the adaptive learning and adaptive technology. These are words that we've been hearing a lot, but there seems to be a lot of different nomenclature. Adaptive technology and adaptive learning can mean so many different things to so many different people, especially when it's coming from different companies. What specifically does your adaptive technology mean? What does it do? What specifically does adaptive learning mean and do within your system? So that's what I'm hoping to explain today. But before I get super deep into the weeds, I wanted to talk a little bit about transforming learning and education and back us all the way up to the School of Athens, which is quite some time ago. It's about 500 years ago, actually. And when I was thinking about adaptive technology and what instructors are faced with, which is an incredibly revolutionized community, not only from the educational system, but the students who are involved in that community, a critical piece of that community. So many things have changed. So you recognize all of this, maybe not all of the people, but the photo, and why is this recognizable 500 years later, and why did it resonate throughout our culture? There's a lot of different reasons. This is artistically beautiful, but the image includes all the greatest mathematicians, philosophers, and scientists from classical antiquity, and they're joining the conversation. They're exchanging ideas, and that kind of discourse is incredibly important. And it's what we're doing here today, so that we can make systemic changes throughout our own classrooms and our own communities to have a broader effect that's more positive and longer lasting. So that's what we're doing today, and how does this relate to adaptive technology? If you think about classical education, it was really fascinating. I really loved this course that I took with my Greek mythology and Greek history professor, because he talked a lot about what is the role of the student and the tutor in the Greek ages. And it was all about discourse, creating a discourse, seeing what the student knew, what the student didn't know, and then engaging in dialogue, which was most often in a public forum. It's very different than what happened perhaps in the Dark Ages or the Middle Ages when there's some backpedaling. But in terms of adaptive technology, and today, 10 to 15 years ago, and even now, there's been so much change. So much change, not only the tools that you have, but the kinds of students that are in your classrooms, that this kind of discourse needs to continue happening. But how do you do that when you have classes of not 20 or 5 or 10, but 50, 60, 100, sometimes 1,000 students? And moreover, those students, they're very different than even when I went to school. When I graduated in 2008. These 21st century students are constantly on the go. They're constantly using Facebook, social media, but they're a little nervous about educational software because it looks different, it feels different, it's static. They don't know quite what to do with it. So something that's really interesting are students today. So this is a word cloud, and I think it's really fascinating. I'd like you to take a second and just start to read some of the words. What are students today? This is what they think of themselves as. This is what they're using. So they're systemically different in how they learn, how they interact with their environment, and moreover, their expectations from their environment. But moreover, we are inherently different now too. With the advent of computers and Google and personalized shopping, we expect very different things when we go shop, for instance. Our habits and the technology actually informs how we get to places. Google results are suddenly tailored for us if you're using the same machine. Banking, personalized, has different, you can actually get different credit card recommendations based on your banking preferences and what you click on. Very fascinating. Maps, now you can choose to ignore highways or off-roads, or the technology can actually detect what you're doing. So this has been going on for years, and in fact it started with the phone book. I could go off on a long tangent, but I won't. It's really fascinating. But it's in the news. It's actually even in surgery, in high-level surgeries, there's adaptive surgery technology that doctors are using. And it's even marketing. It tracks your eyes, right? So some videos and some cameras, and I think they're hoping to deploy this to the general public. The cameras will watch your eyes, and suddenly the advertisements and what you receive will differ depending on how long you spend looking at perhaps this woman here, maybe I love her blue shirt, versus this fellow up here, right? And it'll start to conglomerate those differences. And now, this sounds a little scary, I'm really sorry, but now we can do this with education. And this is we're going to go to good side, not the dark side, so don't worry. So adaptive learning at Pearson specifically. So I want to get into what is adaptive learning for us, and how did we come about to start doing all this research and investigating it. And it started about 10 years ago. So this is not something new that we just started marketing a year and a half and we're really excited. We started in adaptive technology a decade ago. And Kristen's group and other research and redesign groups have been looking at this kind of material for a decade. So we've been building on these foundational blocks that you haven't even seen for a while. And I won't go into that because it's not very fun. But what I will go into are a little bit of the underpinning algorithms and how it informed our adaptive study plan. So our adaptive study plan is very, very different than anything else out on the market. And why I say it's very, very different, it has two goals. One, it wants to remediate students on topics with which they're struggling, and it wants to help prepare students for upcoming tests and exams. So as Nick and Andre and Kate and Kristen mentioned, there's a lot of different ways, a lot of different techniques that you can motivate your students to do different things. The adaptive study plan is there to support you in that goal. You can change so many different settings within the adaptive study plan that 80%, for instance, of the adaptive study plan will feed from homework questions. Or maybe you want the adaptive study plan to focus more on the content and the answers that students submit for quizzes, because those are higher stakes. But moreover, the adaptive study plan doesn't just feed from the homework. Sorry, lots of influence here. It feeds from the personalized course that they receive. So the material that feeds into that is, of course, homework, quizzes, tests, but also any kind of work that they'll do on the e-text for the fall, that kind of information will feed into the adaptive study plan. The difficulty of the homework questions that they work on, the time spent, all of these different metrics will feed into the adaptive study plan. And it's not just pulling from one section, so just the homework, or just our mobile application, which is adaptive, which is flashcard-based and uses confidence metrics. It pulls from all sorts of different places. That makes it really, really unique. And I know that this is different too. Do you guys have any questions about where it pulls from or what helps it accomplish this?
So T, can you just run through like an example, like for example, maybe in econ, supply and demand, that concept, if they've mastered it or they haven't mastered it, what that looks like in the adaptive study?
So I can play a video. Kate, I know that you were involved with some of this. Would you mind telling everyone here, at least in accounting, what happens if they don't understand like credit and debits?
So they, what happens is they ask people who teach the subject to go through and look. So I'm looking at a problem, maybe I'm looking at a problem like a couple chapters in accounting, and the student does not do well in this question. And in almost all of our courses, the knowledge builds as it goes through the semester. And so, for example, let's say that a student goes through a question and it was asking to do a lot of journal entries, which is something that you do like very early on, chapter 1 or chapter 2. And if the student is getting a lot, if they're not very successful on this question that is asking them to do journal entries, it could be that they don't understand how to do an adjusting entry, but it actually might be that they don't know the debit and credit rules. So what I was asked to do was to link those things. So saying, if I'm in chapter 4 and I'm not doing well in the journal entry part, maybe I just don't get journal entries. So instead of having a student repeatedly do more versions of the same question that they really don't get, let's go back and see what that foundation is. Or a lot of times too, students don't understand the format of the financial statement. They don't know that the basic format of the income statement is revenues minus expenses equals income. Then they're not going to get any of these other nuances. So it helps to remediate the student by saying, okay, you didn't do well in this question. Let's go back here. It seems from these things that there's some foundational knowledge you don't get, and you master that. And all of us, I think, have had that experience with our students, where they come to the office hours, and you start talking, and you realize their real problem is they're just missing this chunk. And that's where this, like this technology is so amazing is it helps to analyze all the data and figure out what that tone is and then send them back there. Now we can master it now and go forward. And it eliminates, I think we've also all seen that student where the gap just gets bigger and bigger. They missed a couple things early on, and no matter how awesome you are and how much they try, they don't have those building blocks. They're just going to get farther and farther away, and they're going to start saying, practice doesn't make me better.
So I'm going to see if this video will load. I'm a little nervous about the internet. It's kind of slow. And if it does, I can show you a great video that walks through the concept map that underpins each of our MyLabs and which the study plan rests upon. So it's kind of like those Greek tutors when they were speaking with a student, or if you were speaking with a student, it would adjust on based on their weaknesses or their strengths. And this is what the adaptive study plan does. It's personalized content in real time to reinforce concepts that each student is either strong or weak in, depending on what they need help with. It's also about leveraging data. Oh my gosh, it might happen. It's also about leveraging data to figure out both when and how the student learns best. So when I say when, that means eventually the system will be able to detect, does this student learn best in the morning, in the afternoon, late at night? And then also how. This is coming in the future, it's not here yet. And then also, it will recognize, does the student learn best from a multimedia resource? Do they learn best from practice? And then moreover, it will move with the student through time. So think about that too. Should I press play here? Let's see if it works. We'll see if it starts talking. When I say through time and across courses, I think that's when administrators and chairs and people really start getting excited. So I know that you were showing some of the administrative things that you can do. Like you can email students, you can look at students who weren't active in the course or if they're struggling. But imagine being able to do that across the student's profile. So right now, if a student takes microeconomics, they'll have all this data and actually have a warm start when they go to microeconomics. And they're using my econ lab with Newton, which is the technology that uses that the adaptive study plan uses. So similarly, financial and managerial accounting, they'll have a warm start in the second piece. And eventually what we're hoping to have is a map for students when they move beyond single silos of information, so beyond accounting or just economics. But this is what's coming in the future, and this is what makes our adaptive study plan so powerful. It's not just in one silo, it's not isolated in just one place, it runs throughout the course. And I had a sneaky suspicion this would happen, and what I can do is I can email you all this video, but it does give you a nice 3-4 minute walkthrough of how the adaptive study plan works.
You can see there should, I don't know, they say they should follow this. Not everybody and all teachers use the Pearson products. And some people do. Let's say maybe for financial accounting, some people will use the Pearson product, but for managerial they won't. And sometimes, and this is just a suggestion for Pearson, that the only way to ensure that it's a continuous process with the same publisher is to look for pricing and pricing packages that will span from one class to another, so department chairs and deans are more encouraged to say, oh, this is what we will use, because I know that is a huge issue for us. For most people, you say, well, I'm assuming that the students at your school have money, or they have some money. But, I'm going to give you that over 50% of our students, their income bracket is $0, that we have those, to $3,000. So for them to go out there and pay, certain amounts into a bookstore is almost not possible. So that becomes a huge restriction. So, Belen has done wonders with us for us to be able to adopt an example like Econ Lab and IT Lab. But as CBT is working towards a move, we're going to have to look at a price structure for those students. It's a huge issue. But I'm going to say this, data is really important. Patricia did a wonderful job collecting data about some students. We average in about every 2 years whatever is at the end of the spectrum in your classes, in your program, I can say I cannot quantify whatever it is they've done because they use the same thing. Otherwise, I'm going to have basically Terry say, I'm using this, and Barbara using that, and somebody using something else. That makes
So,
sense?
yeah, no, it definitely makes sense. I think, Sunny, you can speak to this really well, but I know that we've started working with bookstores and to do certain programs to incentivize students to go there so the prices are lower, and so that they order to fuller amounts as well, and order more affordable material, some of the more digital options. And we can also do direct bill. But Sunny, is that something you can speak to now?
This is a topic that comes up quite a bit. Price is always a topic of conversation when it comes to education. And I think we've done some pretty creative things across the board in terms of pricing. And we have to be really careful by not giving too much choice to students, because then it becomes a paradox, right? The paradox of choice is like, did I get the best deal here and there? So I think maybe 1 or 2 or 3 choices are always a good thing to have. An all-digital option in the business school, or a certain type of curriculum where we can offer an all-Pearson solution, all-digital solution with an opportunity to upgrade to the print is the best that's worked for us. And that's pretty cheap for students who are buying a $200 textbook. An all-digital option, just to give you an idea, with e-text, could run a student, if we did an all-Pearson solution in a program, like $60, right, per course. And then if they wanted the actual print version of that book, they could pay a $20 upcharge to get the print version of that book delivered to their house, pre-home punched. So to keep the cost low. So that's something we've definitely talked about at an institutional level, and we're willing to come to the table and say, okay, what are your needs, and how can Pearson deliver? So the option is there.
Rose, did that answer your question? Oh, sorry.
Something, Barbara, wasn't you, Terry, wasn't you explain this is the case in your program?
Yes, I don't know if we want the full digital version. We would like the print option as well. The problem is, we have individual courses we're using your competitor products, and for a 1-unit course, it becomes very, very expensive. And then they're taking 3 or 4 of our classes, and they have huge amounts. So what we're trying to see, and one of the main things here, is to see if we can maybe adopt the Pearson as the other part of our department uses Pearson, and if we could do a full package.
So
We're
what
getting
do
it
you
better.
teach? What do you teach?
I'm in the office applications.
So office apps, so IT, so
IT, but
Word,
it's
Excel,
the
concepts.
Word, Excel, keyboard, and PowerPoint, that. But on the other side, the programming, the gaming, that sort of thing. Some of the people are using Pearson products. And also for our 181 computer, whatever it is, that one we use the Pearson product. Hopefully, if we have a full commitment, the price will go down for our students.
Yeah, I think the best thing to do in that situation is to all of us maybe come to a presentation to show you what our capability is and see what your students are currently paying for those courses.
Definitely.
So you guys know where X is, right? And then we can come and say, okay, look, this is what we can do with the 2 options that we have. And I probably guarantee this, it'll probably be a lot lower than what your students are paying right now for all those courses. We did this in the School of Education, where students were, taking early childhood or special ed or ed psychology, or taking all these courses in teacher education, and they had to buy a ton of books. And it was costing like $2,000 worth of books. Well, Pearson came up with a digital library solution, and we brought the cost down like $600. So if you wanted to go through this teacher education program, you can buy all your books digitally and own them for a set period of time, even after you finish the program, for a lot lower price. So I think the best thing to do at this point is to let's come in and find out which students you're paying currently.
We need to do that pretty soon.
And we can definitely.
Very soon, yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
He had a question.
No, I'm ready to listen to the content. That's a conversation going to happen. But I'd really like to get the
Daryl's
content.
totally redoing his whole program. So his head's
No,
already
because we have that
exploding.
conversation, I just want to get through this.
Yeah.
Mike, didn't you tell him do one thing at a time? Just change one
plans to expand it to the other schools. Right now, this is where we have the most sophisticated technology, and this is where a lot is moving and shaking. In terms of IT and some of the other courses, we have dynamic study modules. So dynamic study modules are already loaded into the course. They're a little tab on the left-hand side, but what are dynamic study modules? So again, this is like the nomenclature that I'm hoping to get around today. It leverages more than 10 years of research in brain science to deliver highly engaging personal learning to students mobily. These are meant for students to use on their smartphones, their iPhone, their Android, on an iPad even. But by applying key findings in neurobiology and cognitive psychology, we've discovered that if we just do a couple different things, it helps students learn 50 to 75% faster than they would with traditional methods. So we have some ongoing studies. Right now, it's fascinating, and I'll actually show you the statistics. But what it is, I'll show you. Again, I'm nervous about the internet, but we'll see. Is that students go through the process of test, learn, retest. And the students converse to perhaps a class or a textbook where there's a lot of information presented. Students are immediately presented with a question. So primed their brain for learning. So this is where some of the brain science is coming in. And then they use confidence metrics to assess, am I not certain, am I certain, am I positive? And then these chunks, these questions are very small, so it's chunking the material for faster learning and longer retention. So they'll get through a deck of cards, and these are very, very short, 8 to 10 questions actually. 8 to 10 questions, and then the students will review their answers with additional learning aids. And sometimes these learning aids are just a little bit of text. Sometimes it takes them to an external website. Sometimes it's a video. Sometimes it's practice. It varies depending on the question, depending on whether it's in IT or if it's in economics, if it's in accounting, wherever it is. Yeah, it's just taking a while to load. So then, after students review, they'll actually get a new deck of cards, which is personalized based on their answers. And they cannot continue or master that application, that chapter, until they've demonstrated full confidence and 100% correct. So it brings a new facet to the table, which is mobile technology. Students are always on their phone, they're always learning on their phone, they're texting, and now there's something that they can do while in line at Starbucks, while they're waiting to get into the gym, and it's very short, and it's meant to be short. And I'm going in through Blackboard here, sorry, so I can show you. But what's more is if students are doing this at home on their iPad, it actually initiates cross-brain learning and functioning, so it leads to longer memory that way. So I don't know if you've ever seen like choreographers or like dancers that are having to learn new choreography. They'll frequently go like this when they're trying to remember something, and it's the same movement on the screen because it helps with cross-brain functioning and it activates long-term memory. So it's very interesting. But the dynamic study modules can be downloaded on your phone. You can do it today with your Pearson credentials. So while I wait for that, this isn't technology that's also just in education. Some of the largest companies in the world are using this right now. Accenture, I think most of you have probably heard of it, is using this technology. So too is Barbary, which is the largest company in the US for law students taking the bar. And then also the Princeton Review uses it. So it's already in use and has been used for a while. But for educators, the dynamic study modules bring in a robust set of tools for analysis. So for fall, you'll be able to assign these. Do you want students to do this? Do you want them to get points? Will be extra credit? How long do you want them to spend on this? So it's very fascinating. So let me just go in through Blackboard. I'm going to pop into an economics course. It will take me there. Do you have this on your phone? By chance? So we can also pass it around so you guys can see what this looks like. students' adaptive study plan and the dynamic study modules are real time to help students stay on track and help students achieve a higher level of subject matter mastery. So it's fascinating and works outside of the homework, yet these feed into the adaptive study plan. Here's the dynamic study plans. Do you guys have, while this is loading, do you guys have any questions about the dynamic study modules, what it does, how it would function on the phone, how it would tie into your course?
Is this Blackboard only?
No, I happen to have a Blackboard demo account, and I just linked it up with my econ lab. We can link it up with my IT lab, we can link it up through Canvas course. No! Sad.
So what the nature of the questions and such? Is it, you know, look at this supply demand curve and see which is, and look at that or?
They're usually shorter questions. Sometimes it'll involve a graph. Usually they're more concept-based, just getting students to run through the information in an isolated manner so it activates recall. It's not going to be multi-step. It's not going to be anything like the simulations or the grader projects would have a student do in my IT lab, which are multi-step and very involved and kind of open book. This is meant to be done on their own and very quick to move them through the information.
So flashcards or just with the map?
They're like flashcards, but they're deeper because they test, learn, and then retest themselves, and it involves confidence metrics.
How broad are your offerings?
In terms of like what courses?
The different courses, the textbooks and courses and stuff.
It'll be with IT, it'll be with, most of our business courses in the fall will have some kind of.
Okay, business, IT, and.
So my finance lab, my accounting lab, my econ lab, and my IT lab.
No programming?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. Although my programming lab is moving to the same platform as the other my labs, so I imagine in the future that will also be able to.
It will, but it's not slated for fall.
Yeah, in the future it's going. In the future. Kristen and I'm regretting my decision to use your computer because it was convenient.
Reality check.
I know. I will.
Can you do the video walkthrough right there?
Let's see.
So we'd be able to say, here's a bunch of facts and we want them to really get down to customize the benefit, or will the textbook offer have already presented information that's sort of
Right now, they are not book specific. For some of our more popular books and courses, they will be book specific for the fall. But they're exactly about 20 to 25, and they are not currently available for customization at a top-down level. Those are the 25 questions. Students will run through them. It'll be adapted to the students' learning outcomes and needs, and they'll go from
It's
there.
going to be one of those things where you say, I'm doing chapter 1. So before you come to class, have done those slides wherever you want.
So you understand the concepts of supply and demand
Before you
go
start.
try to read something in depth about
Right.
this group.
The single purpose in mind, to improve the academic success of all students, one student at a time. Help your students break through to a new world of learning with MyLab's dynamic study modules, powered by Amplifier. The dynamic study modules personalize learning by providing the right instruction on the right topic at the right time for each individual student, so students come to class prepared, already understanding basic concepts, and are ready to thoughtfully contribute. Accessed via computer or mobile device, the MyLab Dynamic Study Modules deliver a personalized solution that's proven to decrease study times, enhance test scores, boost knowledge acquisition, and improve knowledge retention. Based on profound breakthroughs from neurobiology, cognitive psychology, and game studies, and using advanced algorithms, the dynamic study modules will ensure your students achieve higher scores on tests and exams, and your classroom will transform into a livelier and more constructive environment for higher order learning. Here's how it works. scientific findings demonstrate that the process of asking questions first actually triggers the brain to learn faster. Additionally, each question provides real-time feedback without immediately disclosing the correct answer, heightening curiosity and concentration. This, in turn, increases the production of long-term memory. Another critical feature is the patented answer format, where students are asked to indicate how confident they are about their answers. After students answer the first set of questions, MyLab's dynamic study modules show them the learning associated with each question in a flashcard-like format. Here, the information that students need to learn is broken into the individual concepts or ideas associated with each question. This approach is taken directly from cutting-edge research into how the brain stores information. Once students review the learning for the first set of questions, the dynamic study modules present them with a new set of questions. Students cycle through this adaptive process of test,
I've gone through this process with Barbary, and it's really kind of interesting because, as you know, it's got something like 16 subjects you're studying law for a bar exam. And it really is interesting because you take these tests and really points out your weaknesses where you have to put more emphasis in. And you're taking a number of NBE questions, like multiple choice type of questions. And you may not realize, but then it's pinpointing that you may have a contracts law problem, even though it's mixing with all these questions. And it is fascinating because you can now see when they start to map out, you're very weak here. And whereas, quite honestly, I took some of those tests, I thought I was strong until I came to those results. So it really is fascinating how it tells you that very specific information from a student perspective and self-learning, if you will. I was telling someone that I didn't even really understand how I understood things until I went through something like this, which I thought was pretty fascinating.
So for instructors, it's another tool to make those kinds of curricular changes. Maybe you look at the dynamic study module results 10 minutes before class, and you say, wow, most of my students didn't understand, X, Y, Z in law, or something in an app course for IT, or they don't understand something about credits or debits, which chapter 3 was talking about. So it allows for very pinpointed changes which you otherwise wouldn't be able to accomplish in classes of 50, 60 in multiple sections, and sometimes when you're driving to multiple campuses too. So the adaptive study plan and the dynamic study modules are products born from about 10 years of at least Pearson research and Pearson looking into things like this. What is going to work for our customers, our students, our professors. The last thing that I wanted to show you, and it's not necessarily adaptive, but it has to, it's going to work. Yeah, it's just loading. But it has to do with in-class techniques and how you understand what students understand is learning catalytics. So learning catalytics is an open-ended, it provides an open-ended question format through one's own mobile device. So, you know how you have clickers? Students have to pay like $40, $45 for clickers. This way they can come to class with their phone, and they can use their phone to do the same thing. It's also much more affordable because of that. But they're, instead of like a couple different formats as clickers have, the learning catalytics, there are 18 different options. So students can do a word cloud, they can graph, they can do short answer, matching, multiple choice. They're getting peer and group interaction choices. There will be populated questions for different topics, and you can also go in and create your own questions. It's quite easy. I was in there the other day. And for you all who are here, I'll send you a link so you can investigate it, but I have a feeling that it'll kick me out of my Prezi and take too long to load, so I'm very sorry.
When you say open-ended, you mean you're talking about how you can add your own questions, or is there more to it than that?
Both. You can have open-ended responses from students, and you can create your own questions. There's 18 different kinds of pre-made questions, 18 different types, but you can also create your own. It's very interesting. For some of my IT professors, they've been really interested because they can do what they want to do. Like you guys it was just too restrictive.
So I assume this is all text-based. I can see how if you start to get into certain design courses, it could be interesting if it allow you to do graphics-based questions and answers too. I don't know if you thought about that.
Since it's mobile technology and it can be done on the smartphones, they
Yeah, so you don't have
probably-
much real estate. Yeah, sure.
That's
Yeah.
true. Yeah, so it's relatively simple. Usually I see that with economics professors, with supply and demand curves, they want them to shade in the part of the graph. It's applicable. So learning catalytics is another weapon in your repertoire that for fall 2014 will be included with any mind lab that a student buys with eText. So it's quite a fascinating option. And as soon as this loads.
Let me ask you a question about repetition. Does it have, so I saw you pointing out, I'm sort of sure about this, that's kind of a hint to it, that it should come back and help you drill on that. Does it also incorporate things like space repetition? I saw this on Monday, I rocked it, so I don't really need to see it again on Wednesday and Thursday, so that would be spread out more versus something I'm really not sure about, I better see Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Because you know, if you hear something once, you still need that basic repetition.
You have to get it raised twice for it to kind of disappear in your deck, sort of. So you do have to see it a couple times. And if you get it right both times and you're 100% sure, it moves it. But, you know, but it doesn't like totally get rid of it forever. Sometimes some of these things.
You know, like set the minimum number of times. Instead of
Eventually you'll be able to do a lot of parameters. This
Yeah.
is just a first go with us.
maybe you want it to be at least 3.
Yeah.
And reset for like creative session night before one.
Right. You guys will definitely have it for fall.
Yes.
With all
So-
your ITs.
Sweet.
Yeah, I'll check into whether or not the results are activated or updated based on incremental time used or needed based on the adaptive study plan. I want to say that currently it's not a function, but it's a really interesting idea. And it makes a lot of sense. So I did want to show you guys these statistics. So with the dynamic study modules, these are some of the results that we're seeing. The confident mastery of concepts, 95% of students, or excuse me, when using the dynamic study modules, they feel 95%, I feel, thoroughly, okay, I'm going to start over.
Yeah, you're actually
From what I understand, the dynamic study modules, when students use them, I know, right? You know, right? When they've mastered a concept, it means they've thoroughly remediated the misinformation and knowledge gaps. And so 95% of students, I guess, when I'm looking at these statistics and I can get more information, feel that that is true. Also, there's a 79% have a longer retention after 12 months. So 5% is the industry standard. I'll let you guys read this. 75% reduction in study times. So this is pretty powerful. It's all adaptive learning. So this is learning catalytics, which I just mentioned, and I can send you guys a short video on how it operates. So, and then I just wanted to wrap up. So Pearson, we're really looking to partner with schools, with professors, with students by providing these kinds of resources. So just an idea of how to use some of this material, maybe before class, before pre-lecture assignments, students can access those. They can access an enhanced e-text, which have links and sample exercises, and they can also use those dynamic study modules to test themselves. Do I understand this information? Then maybe during class you can use different resources from the MyLabs, some of the media resources, or learning catalytics if you wanted to test their understanding. And then after class, students could use the adaptive study plan, which is informed by everything in the MyLabs, to help them understand the material better. And then they can also use the homework assignments, the quizzes, and the tests. And it's cyclical. So it's really fascinating what you can do with Pearson solutions. And then I also just wanted to bring us back to the School of Athens, and specifically Plato. In the Republic, he wrote, compulsory learning never sticks in the mind. And I think when dealing with these 21st century students, they're used to so many different kinds of personalized shopping, banking. Now we can provide them with personalized learning. It no longer has to be rote, it no longer has to be the same, it no longer has to be one path for every single student. And it can energize and make them more curious about what they're learning. Are they going to be more interested in marketing, in their marketing course, their economics course, if they're given just what they need to know and remediate on just what they're struggling? I would think yes, but of course this is up to you. So finally, in sum, I just wanted to give a quick sum of Pearson's Adaptive Learning Solutions and what they do. The adaptive study plan, the dynamic study modules, things like learning catalytics, it really empowers students and instructors because it delivers such highly engaging and personally adaptive learning paths. Each student is going to have something different. It's incredibly exciting. Moreover, they're integrated throughout the MyLabs. Our adaptive pieces aren't just in one silo. It's just not off on the side in these flashcards or not just in one part of the ebook or just one thing. The adaptive study plan will drop in the e-text, dynamic study modules, quiz, tests, homework, and moreover, you can adjust that yourself. So again, it's empowering instructors and students. Moreover, it's inherently mobile and social. Mobile dynamic study modules, they're meant to be used on the go. We know these students are traveling, they're full-time moms, dads, full-time students, full-time, they're just everywhere. I don't know how they handle it all. But we have the dynamic study modules to help them out. Inherently social because students can start popping up in class using learning catalytics, using these tools that will allow them to do peer and group interaction, and then you as the instructor can get results immediately in class. And then also, this is all based on research and brain science. And if we don't have the research, we want to partner with you to get that research and get the statistics and get data, not only for us, because we want to be centered on the learner and efficacy, but for you, so you guys can lower drop rates, lower failure rates, have a more successful experience, and so your students can be more successful when they graduate, because they're probably not lifelong students. We hope they're lifelong learners. They're going to school to get a better job and to better themselves or their family or their children. So next time you're thinking about technology, about your classroom, I hope you think about Pearson, and hope you think about some of the adaptive solutions that we have. So I think that's it. Do you have any questions?
I have an observation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think we're headed in the right direction with all this, and the idea of making this more interesting and engaging and allowing students, giving them a way of adapting their learning strategies to their own lifestyles, right? But I find it's kind of an amusing paradox that the two things that I think we can come away with is that freshmen don't do optional and mandatory learning doesn't stick, never sticks in the mind. So we still have our challenges as educators.
It is. There are always some challenges inherent. I guess I should have been more sensitive about that. I'm sorry.
No, I think there's lot of good points.
You know, just like the revolution of education in the 80s and 90s, I think as educators in the school systems and as a company that's supporting y'all, you're being pulled in so many different directions and told how to do things in so many different ways that it must be overwhelming, and really we're here to support you. And if you guys want to run a study, you guys want to run a test, does this really help my students? How will this make my course more exciting and more engaging? We're here to help, and I think our faculty advocates really did hit the nail on the head. You try one thing, a little thing, before just dumping in and diving in deep. Yeah?
We started my IP lab for CIS when I don't know, 8 years now, 11?
Yeah.
Or 7. And I use the data, I manage the account for City, so I have access to every single roster. So I have used that information for SLO. When the course was designed on purpose, I used the particular assignments by chapter by a particular SLO in the course. And there's other SLOs as well, but there were some particular coming from that. And last week, finally, I believe that maybe 3 years ago, one of your writers, maybe you guys did one of the white papers on this SLO stuff. Now that we're using Taskroom for the SLO for individual classes, it's where actually it became evident. And I think that we should try to look at a similar study if the people from CBT, and particularly one course, if we could actually study that class over time is something that I'm interested in doing. Because I want to be able to quantify real improvement. What do you think about that, Terry? If we can figure out, I would like to pick up the 120 and say with the 120, let's go ahead and analyze this course and look at implementing this particular method of what, how can we are here, we know what
for students who do like to study, I know my daughter studies well, it would be nice to know that they don't have to go over every key concept again and again and again. If they cut that by half the second time and cut by half again, and still be well prepared for the test. I think it's a good move.
The dynamic study modules are especially powerful for exactly that reason. They're quick. Any other questions or comments, or any questions for our faculty advocates who came from out of town?
They'll be here in the back if you guys want to ask them any questions, and I know you guys have had a lot of interaction. Period's been a long day, so we will end early and let them enjoy when the sun was out like for 2 seconds. I just want you to know.
It's a sea blue.
It'll be lovely tomorrow, right? Thank you guys. You're going to put in Pearson. And then it's break. So you go look at it. I just give her the Pearson routine right here. Yeah, I asked her. She said before I know, so I don't forget to start on her. Yeah. They will be in on the new. Okay. You're going through.
I'd offer you a ride home, but I have a box of dishes on the passenger seat that I would from my grandmother that I've been secondhand store. Each time I go home, I just look and feel like hearing them. So Yeah, the boxes. I've been trying, I tried to do one.